At 6:23 a.m. in Abyane, 87 kilometers southeast of Kashan, a woman the family calls Bibi Fatime lifts a copper kettle that has survived 3 wars, 2 revolutions, and the death of every person who owned it before her. At 6:55 a.m., on Hormuz Island, 890 kilometers south, where the Persian Gulf meets the Strait of Hormuz, a fisherman named Ismail pours water from a plastic jerry can that cost more than the fish he'll catch today. This is not a documentary about tea. This is about the things Iran refused to let you destroy. The hospitality when you have nothing. The fire when they cut the gas. The language when they silence the tongue. The mourning when they take everything else. This is about what remains when a country spends 45 years being starved, sanctioned, invaded, isolated, and erased, and still offers you a glass of tea. This is Iran, not the threatening country of nuclear centrifuges and burning flags. This is the one that survived. In 1979, the world stopped trading with Iran. The population was 38 million. In 2024, Iran is still here. 88 million people. But 2.4 million left rural areas between 2006 and 2016 alone. The villages are emptying. The young are leaving. The old remain. What follows is a single morning, from first light to the second glass of tea, in 6 villages that show you how survival becomes a skill when the world tries to make survival impossible. But by boiling water, making fire from waste, pulling water from stone, and opening doors to strangers, when the world spent half a century trying to close every door on them. "87 kilometers southeast of Kashan, where the Carcass Mountains meet the high desert plateau, the sound changes. Abyane, the place of willows, though no willows grow here now. Population 1979, 850 residents. Population 2024, 250 residents. 2,300 meters above sea level. At 6:23 a.m., Bibi Fatime, age 71, lifts a copper kettle her mother carried from Natanz on her wedding day in 1947, the year before the CIA began planning the coup that would change everything. The kettle is hammered copper, 1.4 kilograms, handle wrapped in undyed wool, base darkened by 76 years of fire. The air smells like wood smoke and crushed saffron, and the iron-rich earth that stains everything in this village the color of dried blood. You hear the scrape of copper against clay, a sound unchanged since before the revolution, before the Shah, before oil, before anyone cared what happened in Iran. The water reaches a boil in 4 minutes because at 2,300 meters, water boils at 91 degrees Celsius, not 100. She pours it over loose black tea leaves in a smaller pot that sits atop the kettle. Her granddaughter, age 7, watches from the doorway. This kettle isn't heritage. It's survival equipment. In 2018, when Trump reimposed sanctions and the rial collapsed from 32,000 to 190,000 per dollar overnight, the price of a new kettle went from affordable to impossible. A Chinese-made electric kettle cost 4,500,000 rials, half a month's salary for a teacher. Bibi Fatima pours the first glass for her granddaughter. She learned this from her mother, Zara, who died in 1998. Zara learned it from her mother, who lived through the 1953 coup, who watched the Americans and British overthrow Mossadegh because he wanted Iranians to profit from Iranian oil. 3 generations of women who watched the world take and take and take, and still offered tea to strangers. The kettle has boiled water every morning since 1947. It has outlived the monarchy. It has outlived Mossadegh, the Shah, Khomeini, 1 million soldiers who died in the war with Iraq. It will outlive Bibi Fatima. It will outlive her granddaughter. And it will still make tea the morning after that. The kettle doesn't care about your foreign policy. It only cares about the fire beneath it and the hands that understand that survival is a skill, not a prayer. "340 kilometers northwest of Abyane, where the Sahand volcanic range meets the Karasu River Valley, the sound changes. Kandavan, the place of beehives. 601 residents as of 2016. Population 1979, 1,200 residents. 2,200 meters above sea level, carved into volcanic rock. At 6:31 a.m., a man the family calls Haji places walnut charcoal into a samovar manufactured in Tabriz in 1961. The samovar is nickel-plated brass, 11.2 kilograms, 73 centimeters tall, The interior tube is copper. The teapot on top is ceramic with a copper lid. The air smells like walnut smoke and volcanic mineral water. You hear the charcoal settling, the air being pulled upward, the water beginning to vibrate. His grandson, age 14, watches from the carpet. The boy's name is Babak, an ancient Persian name banned by the government for 6 years after the revolution because it was too nationalist. His parents registered him anyway, bribing a clerk 500,000 reals. His name is an act of resistance. So is the tea. This samovar isn't nostalgia. It's what happens when you can't import anything for 45 years. In 1979, Iran's economy was integrated with the West. You could buy a German kettle, an American toaster, a Japanese rice cooker. Then the revolution happened. Then the embassy hostages. Then the sanctions. Haji Samovar was made in 1961, 63 years old. No plastic parts to crack, no electronic components to fail, just brass and copper and fire. It runs on walnut charcoal, made by a man in Osku, 28 kilometers north, using a technique unchanged since the Safavid dynasty in 1501. When sanctions cut you off from the global economy, you don't die. You just remember what worked before the global economy existed. Haji pours the first glass for his grandson, Babak. He learned this from his father, who was killed in 1993 in a tractor accident the government refused to investigate. His father learned it from his father, who carved this cave house deeper into the rock in 1911. Haji's hands are scored with burn scars. Babak's hands are smooth. But when Haji pours, Babak's hands move and mirror, learning the angle, the height, the wrist rotation. The samovar will outlive them both. It doesn't care what language you speak or what government rules from Tehran, or whether the West ever forgives Iran for 1979. It only cares about the fire and the water and the hands that refuse to forget how things are made. "520 kilometers south of Kandavan, where the Dasht-e Kavir Desert begins its 77,600 square kilometer expansion into nothing, the sound changes. Garme, the warm place. Population 1979, 340 residents. Population 2024, 87 residents. "850 meters above sea level, receives 41 millimeters of rain per year, less than the Sahara. At 5:47 a.m., a man the family calls Akbar, age 56, draws water from a kanat 34 meters deep using a rope thick as a child's wrist. The bucket is galvanized steel, 12 liters. The air smells like nothing. Desert air at dawn has no scent, only absence. You hear the rope unwinding from the wooden windlass. the creak of wood on wood, the distant splash 34 meters below, the silence as the bucket fills, the groan of rope taking weight. Akbar's breathing is measured, practiced. He has done this 14,245 times since he was 12. The water emerges at 14 degrees Celsius, shockingly cold against air already 22 degrees Celsius and rising. He pours it into a copper ewer, then into a kettle. The kettle goes onto a fire made from camel thorn, gathered 8 kilometers away. This qanat isn't ancient history. It's a 23-kilometer-long engineering project that makes human life possible in a place where survival should be impossible. Garme receives 41 millimeters of rain per year. There is no river. The aquifer is 240 meters deep and saline. The qanat was dug in 1501. It taps an aquifer in the Carcass Mountains, 23 kilometers away, 340 meters higher in elevation. Gravity pulls the water through an underground tunnel, underground to prevent evaporation. The tunnel is angled at precisely 1 to 1,000 slope, too steep and it erodes, too shallow and it silts up. Not because the technology failed, but because the world outside the desert finally became more attractive than the world inside it. The qanat doesn't care. It only cares about the slope and the silt and the hands willing to descend into darkness. And soon, there will be no hands left. "615 kilometers east of Garme, where the city of Yazd rises from nothing, the sound changes. Yazd, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth. Population 2024, 521,000. But the old city, the mud brick core, holds only 8,000 now. 1,216 meters above sea level. Receives 49 millimeters of rain per year. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius. At 6:38 a.m., in a house built in 1794 beneath a badgir, a wind tower rising 12 meters above the roofline, a woman named Zara, age 43, pours water from a clay ewer into a copper kettle in a copper kettle, in a basement room where the temperature is 19 degrees. Outside, it is already 28 degrees and climbing toward 41. The ewer is unglazed fired clay, 2.1 kilograms, porous. Water evaporates through the walls, cooling the remaining water inside by 6 to 8 degrees Celsius. You hear wind moving through the tower above, a constant low tone, like breath. The kettle is copper, made in Yazd in 1956. She places it on an electric hot plate purchased in 2018. The water boils in 8 minutes. But it started at 21 degrees Celsius instead of 28 degrees Celsius because of the clay ewer sitting in the basement, cooled by the wind tower. This Badgir isn't decoration. It's proof that Iran was building sustainable architecture 800 years before the West discovered climate change. The Badgir works by thermodynamics. Hot air rises, cool air sinks. The tower creates a pressure differential. Wind enters the top, descends, passes over a wet surface in the basement. Evaporative cooling drops the temperature by 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. The cool air displaces warm air, which rises through a second shaft and exits. No electricity, no moving parts, no carbon emissions, no maintenance beyond occasionally wetting the basement surface. Yazd has 700 remaining Badgirs, down from 3,000 in 1900. Not because they stopped working, but because modernity convinced people that pressing a button is progress, and wind towers are backwards. Except when sanctions cut you off from replacement parts for air conditioners. Except when electricity prices quadruple because the rial collapses. Except when summer blackouts last 6 hours because the national grid can't handle demand. Then, suddenly, the 800-year-old wind tower that requires nothing and costs nothing starts looking like genius. Zara pours the first glass for her daughter, age 17, studying for university entrance exams at a desk positioned beneath the Badgir shaft where the air is coolest. She learned this from her mother, who learned it from her mother, born in this house in 1923 when Reza Shah was modernizing Iran by bulldozing qanats and replacing them with pipes that broke within 10 years. Her daughter doesn't look up from her book, Organic Chemistry, because she wants to be a doctor, because doctors can emigrate. She has never known summer without the wind tower. She assumes this is normal, that basements stay cool while the surface bakes. She doesn't know that most of the world makes cold by burning fossil fuels to power machines that will break within a decade. The Badgir will outlive her. It will outlive her children. It will outlive the Islamic Republic. It will outlive the petroleum economy. And when the last drop of oil is burned, and the last air conditioner breaks, and the world finally realizes that sustainability isn't a luxury, it's survival, Yazd's wind towers will still be breathing. "890 kilometers south of Yazd, where the Persian Gulf meets the Strait of Hormuz, and the island rises in bands of red, yellow, and white salt, the sound changes. Hormuz Island. Population, 1979. 3,841 residents. Population, 2024. 5,134 residents. Sea level. Surrounded by water you cannot drink. At 6:55 a.m., a fisherman the family calls Ismail, age 61, pours water from a plastic jerry can into an aluminum kettle dented by 30 years of use. The jerry can is 20 liters, white plastic, brought by supply boat from Bandar Abbas every Thursday. It costs 35,000 riyals to fill, more than the fish he will catch today are worth. The air smells like salt and diesel and rotting seaweed. You hear water sloshing in the jerry can, a hollow sound, nearly empty. He pours carefully. The kettle takes 1.2 liters. He will use it for tea now, washing later, drinking throughout the day. There is no more until Thursday. Today is Tuesday. This water traveled 60 kilometers from Bandar Abbas by boat. It was pumped from a desalination plant powered by natural gas. It costs more per liter than gasoline. This is not tradition. This is modern failure made routine. Hormuz Island is salt. The soil is salt. The rock is salt. The aquifer is brackish, 12,000 parts per million salinity, undrinkable. For 3,000 years, the solution was simple. You didn't live here year-round. Hormuz was a trading port. Ships brought water in ceramic jars. When the jars ran out, you left. In 1971, the Iranian government built a pipeline from Bandar Abbas. It failed in 1979, corroded by salt air, damaged during the revolution, never repaired because the new government had other priorities, like war with Iraq. Since 1979, water arrives by boat every Thursday. 20,000 liters for 5,134 residents. 3.9 liters per person per day. The WHO recommends 50 liters per person per day. Hormuz gets 7.8% of that. This is what happens when ancient problems meet modern incompetence. Ismail's hands are stained with fish blood and salt. The jerry can is nearly empty, 4 liters remaining. Thursday is 2 days away. There is no younger generation in this house. His children live in Bandar Abbas, where water comes from taps and costs nothing. This is not heritage. This is not wisdom. This is abandonment. And every Thursday, a boat brings water. And every Tuesday, people like Ismail ration what's left. And the world sails past, carrying oil, and doesn't notice. The air smells like burning dung, earthy, acrid, with notes of straw. You hear the fire breathing. Dung doesn't crackle, it whispers. A copper kettle sits on an iron trivet, made in Tabriz in 1949. The water takes 14 minutes to boil, longer than charcoal, longer than wood. But dung is free. And when you earn 18 million riyals per month as a shepherd, and charcoal costs 1.8 million riyals per sack, you burn dung. This This is not choice. This is mathematics.
And that is what you cannot destroy. Iran is Bibi Fatima, age 71, using a kettle from 1947 because kettles don't need software updates. Iran is Akbar, descending into darkness every 7 years to clean a Qanat so his village doesn't die. Iran is Zahra's daughter, studying in a basement cooled by wind while the modern city burns gas. Iran is Ismail, rationing water on an island the government abandoned. Iran is Sagra, burning sheep shit because sanctions made charcoal unaffordable. Iran is 88 million people who have been turning scarcity into ceremony for 2,500 years. And you tried to starve them. And they responded by becoming the most resourceful people on Earth. You didn't break them. You made them unbreakable.
The Carcass Mountains are still there. So is the arsenic. So is the kettle. So is the girl who will, someday, teach her own granddaughter that copper binds to poison at 60 degrees Celsius. And the mourning will continue. Because mournings don't need permission. They don't need sanctions lifted. They don't need reconciliation or diplomacy or the world's forgiveness. They just need hands that know how to make fire and water and tea. And Iran has those hands. 88 million of them.